Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Hobby Lifestyle. This week, ice fishing, just around the corner. We're all getting really excited and everyone wants to get out, but you have to be careful this time of year because the ice is still thin, it's just forming. But we'll go over the basic essentials this week and a few things that you don't really necessarily need to have, but sure make it a lot nicer when you're out there. So please join me this week as we review our ice fishing setup. One of the things you definitely need to be concerned about when you're ice fishing is safety. Safety first. Make sure that when you go out, you come back. One of the things I always like to do, I'll fish on 3 inches of ice. That's a little light for most people. I totally understand that. If you're not comfortable until there's 12 inches of ice, then don't go ice fishing until there's 12 inches of ice. But I do practice safety. This coat here I have on is actually a Striker Predator. It is a float suit. I also have the bibs that go along with it. Anytime I'm on the water, I wear both. I haven't had to use it yet, but it is very warm. I've been out in -40 before and not gotten cold, which is a lot of help. Another thing I always wear is the boot spikes. These are for walking on ice. These are just really cheapy ones that I buy at your department store. They are very important. These cleats bite down into the glare ice and allow you to walk. Not a big deal if there's snow, but if there's glare ice for sure, you definitely need these or you'll slip and you could really hurt yourself. Another thing I always bring with me, especially early in the year, spud bar. This is just a big heavy piece of metal with a chisel on the end. And to use it, you would walk along on the ice and you take it and you bang it. So as you're walking along the ice, you just take this and bang it down in the ice. And if you hit a weak spot, you don't step there. Another thing that I always take with me, rope. There again, save your life. Rope. It's like $3 worth. I also take this with me. What I do is I always figure that if I really needed to, I could tie this onto the rope and then throw this to the individual who could then wrap it around themselves, use this to clamp onto the rope, and then I could pull them out. There again, it's very small, not very big. This is a kayak wet bag is what this is. I just throw the rope and that clamp in there, close it up tight, throw it in the bottom of my ice shelter. But if I ever need it, I know where to find it. Another thing you're certainly going to need when you go ice fishing is some way to put a hole in the ice. Early in the year, less than probably 4 inches, you can use your trusty spud bar. You go out there, spud a nice little hole. Takes a little work. There again, you're not going to cut 100 holes this way, but you can spud a small hole, fish out of that hole, works just fine. The other alternative, and they make a lot of these now, this is actually an auger. The blades are down on this end. Always keep your protective covering on. The blades are like razor blades. They will cut you. This is a frisbee. As you can see, pretty fancy. Poke a hole in there and put it on a shaft so that when you're drilling a hole, if this would come undone, this falls down, this fills the hole. This is an 8-inch, this drills an 8-inch hole. This is a 9-inch frisbee. So there's no way it can actually go through. You definitely want this. I know it looks kind of stupid. They make them that all look kind of stupid as far as I'm concerned, so this one works as good as any. But without this, your auger goes through the ice and you can't get it back, and that's a pretty disappointing way to start your day. So normally, the way this one's sold anyway, it would come with your normal hand auger bit. Here, you would attach this to the top and then turn it to drill a hole through the ice. There again, that works pretty good if it's 6 inches or less. Anything more than 6 inches. The alternative that I use is a Milwaukee drill. I think about any drill will do it, but you just put this on the end and then use this to drill a hole. With the drill on the end here, it turns it really nicely. It's kind of hard on the wrist, I have to admit, but it's still better than trying to drill them all by hand. Does a really nice job. You can drill probably 75, 100 holes with this, just one battery. Take 2 batteries, you're for sure good for the day. It works really well. Another thing I consider a must-have for any ice fishing adventure is electronics. There's many different brands of electronics out there. I think they all basically work the same. Panoptix is a big one right now. I know it's kind of taken over the market, but I just use a couple Hummingbirds. This one here is an $8.99. It's an older model. This is a Helix 5. I buy this special transducer from Hummingbird. They're like $100. Work really well through the ice. People ask me how important are electronics for ice fishing. I wouldn't go if I didn't have my electronics with me. I've driven over an hour away before, found out I didn't have my electronics, turned around and drove right back home without ever drilling a hole in the ice. That's how important that I think it is. Like I said, would not go fishing without them. They're relatively cheap. I think you can get a model like this for $300-400. You can get a depth finder or the transducer for $100. There again, these are the ones I use on my boat all year long. So it's not like that I'm wasting my money. It's something that I already purchased. There again, like I said, they both work really well on the ice. Don't seem to be affected by the cold. Battery will last probably 2 or 3 days. On the Helix 5, it just barely trickles. The 899 has a much bigger screen and therefore sucks a lot more power. You can get about 5-6 hours worth of 12-volt battery. Both of these are run by batteries like this one. I bought it, I think, at your local box store. They seem to work very well. They last many, many years. You can get a little charger to throw on there to charge them up between trips. For the kind of fishing that we do here in Iowa, most of it's for panfish, so we use smaller equipment. I wanted to show you the 2 kinds of rods and reels that I use most often. You have here your ultralight spinning reel and rod. As you can see, it's very, very, very flexible. This works really well for bluegills, crappies, small bass, caught small catfish, small walleyes on it. It works very well for most things. I run 2-pound test here. I use a backer. I filled the spool most of the way up with some braided line, and then I added the monofilament on top of that. That way you don't use as much monofilament line. Like I said, this does work very well. On this particular rod, although it is very flexible, I do have what's called a spring bobber on the end. That's this metal piece here at the end. What that is I took a spring out of a pin and bent it the way I wanted it and put a loop in the end and then painted it with some glow paint, and it works very well. It's very, very super sensitive. So bluegill comes up, takes the jig, you can see it right away. This is another type of rod and reel that I use. This is the Black Betty, the free fall version, on a tickle stick. I believe the whole combination is called the Bionic Pickle. By using this kind of reel, your line doesn't twist as bad as it does with a spinning reel. Just reeling the line onto a spinning reel automatically puts some twist in the line, which will cause your line to have that coily appearance as it comes off the reel. Obviously, as you drop your bait down, especially real small jigs will continue to spin at the bottom of the hole, which is something you don't want because fish don't like that. You want your jig to be nice and steady. You can counteract that a little bit by just shaking the rod just a little bit. At the very end, just shake it. You don't really want to jig it necessarily. You're just shaking it. What that does is it keeps some tension on the line and will hold your bait somewhat steady at the bottom, but it will still twist slowly, but you will slow that twist down. With this type of reel, it does not eliminate all the line twist, but it does reduce it considerably. One thing that I always do before I go out, regardless of the reel, is when I have my bait tied on, I hook it onto a swivel snap that I have hooked onto my front porch, and then I pull the line all the far out as I think I'm going to go that day. I really stretch it and stretch it and stretch it until I stretch all the twist out. And as long as you use a swivel, it does uncoil at the other end. It does help a lot. I do it, like I said, I do it every time I go out. It's something that if you get in the habit of doing, it's not really that painful to do. It's pretty easy, and it really does help in the long run, I believe. One thing about this rod that is different than the other, this does have a very sensitive tip. This is considered to not need a spring bobber because it does have its own. It's very sensitive at the very end. It's flat as opposed to round like a normal rod, and it is very sensitive. It is not as sensitive though as the spring bobber. This does work pretty good for spoons and stuff like that. You get down to a 1/100th ounce jig, you don't know what's on there. A heavier jig will bend it down a little bit, so you will see a little motion there. So on an up bite it will come up, but for the most part you won't see the bites you would on a normal spring bobber. Here's an example of a flip over hut that I use. This happens to be a clam model. It is insulated. I have used Eskimo and I've used a couple other brands too. They're all pretty nice, really. I went with this one because once you pull the seat out, it's a very light sled. It seems to be very durable. I still have an Eskimo too that I use. They're both fine depending on what I'm doing. This one plows a little snow, I have to admit, when you're pulling it, but other than that it works very good. As you can see, it has a little tray to put your stuff in. There's also a little electrical cord sticking out there. I use that to power some LED lights that I have inside. Let me show you how it looks when it's unfolded. So to fold the sled out, once you get there, obviously you drill your holes. You drill your holes right here, and then you would just grab the sled from the back here and flip it right on over. As you can see, there's zippers up here so you can get in. There's a nice doorway here. As you can see, this is the inside. It's a nice little shelter. It keeps you nice and warm, keeps you out of the wind. A little heater in there keeps it very nice and warm. So, the first category that we have is the jigging spoon. As you can see, we have 3 different sizes here. We use these a lot for crappies, bluegills, bass, walleyes. even if you catfish here and there. For when the fish are active or when you're actively searching for fish, one or the other, something you can put down there really jiggles, bring the fish to you. You don't want to stay in one spot for too long when you're fishing a spoon. You want to just hit it and quit it and move on. No reason to stay there. If the fish are there, you'll draw them right away. If not, then you need to move on and find active fish. The next style bait that we have is the jigging minnow. They're again a very active bait. You're looking for active fish, drilling lots of holes, dropping this down, jiggling it a few times. If nothing comes to it, you move on to the next hole. One unique thing about this is the tail on the end causes it to kind of not just hop up and down like a jig, but to actually swim in a circular pattern when you jig it. The more you jig it, the wider it swings out. So it does swing out a little further from the hole, calls fish from a little further away. The next style active bait that we use is a rattling bait. I don't have a whole lot of luck on this, to be honest, but my son does. There again, it's just another bait that you drop down there. You're looking for active fish, you drop it down there, you really rattle it. These seem to work a lot better when the water's a little more dingy. Clear water, obviously the fish can see them a lot better, you don't need to rattle them in. But in the dirty water, these do seem to work very well. These are the 4 basic styles of jigs that we use. The first one you can see is that triangular one, or the diamond shaped one, is a 1/32 ounce called a minnow head. It's kind of an upside down teardrop looking one there. That is a 1/16 ounce teardrop. The one that looks like just a jig head next to that is 1/80th ounce jig head. And then you have a 2.5 millimeter tungsten. I'm not sure what that one actually weighs, but it is by far, as you can see, the smallest one. All of these have a really crappy paint job because I did it myself. I buy them from a couple different companies on the internet and then paint them myself with glow paint. I have about anywhere from 26 cents up to probably 58 cents a piece in these jigs. So I'm saving a lot of money by doing it myself, and it also gives me something to do during the slow times. One of the alternatives to live bait is to use soft plastic. And as you can see here, I have 3 different varieties of soft plastic that I use. We have just the basic power bait, which is just kind of a little wedge shape with 2 little kicker legs. You have the minnow, which looks just like that. It's about 1 inch long, maybe 7/8 of an inch to 1 inch long. Very floppy on the end, very floppy tail, so works very good. And then you have the Trigger X, which is the mustachio style bait. There again, it's just a round ball with 2 little hairs that stick off to the side, as you can kind of see there. All of them work very good on certain days. Some days they don't work at all. Well, thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed our review of our basic ice fishing equipment. I noticed as I was doing my editing that I forgot to mention a few items, one of them being the most important, and that is a good set of ice picks. If you have a good set of ice picks, you can wear these around your neck. They don't have to be expensive. All they have to do is work. Pull these out. If you go into the water, you pull these out and you use these to pull yourself back out onto the ice. There again, very, very good to have with you. Always a good idea to think safe. Second item I forgot to mention would be a scoop. You need this scoop here to scoop the ice out of the hole after you cut it. Makes life a lot easier. Having a scoop with the holes in the bottom certainly makes it a lot easier. And the last item I forgot to mention, and we all know what this is, a flashlight. Not only can you use this to get on and off the ice sometimes, but it also works very good for charging up your glow lures so that they glow nice and bright when you drop them down and the fish can see them. So that will conclude this episode. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, hit the like and subscribe button below. Thank you for your time. Don't sit at home and dream. Get out and live.